now we have this event called the Psi Games, which is this cross-generational conference in which we do lectures, we do workshops, but the main thing that we do, which is different than any other conference, is we have these fun competitions and tournament style competitions where people compete in psychic abilities.
Hakim Isler is the creator of the Psi Games, which is an event that will take place July 31st through August 2nd. This will be a really fun weekend where people can learn from parapsychology experts, and if you want, you can join a team.
So psyop is psychological operations, and in the Army, that is a job in which you basically the definition, the way we describe it in our doctrine, is to persuade, change, and influence the hearts and minds of a foreign target audience.
Hakim is a renowned expert in consciousness research, holistic health, and personal development. He's a dedicated practitioner of remote viewing and Mindsight, which is extraocular vision.
That I have a blindfold on, and you, let's say, hold up a card, or you hold up something, like maybe a card with an animal on it. And I don't have a visual of it in my mind. Like, I'm not seeing a turtle, but for some reason, my inner self tells me, say turtle. And then you say, it's a turtle. And
Hakim is also a 40-year practitioner of martial arts, holding multiple black belts in various arts.
People will be like, hey, you're a ninja. Can you just run up this wall real quick? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, you're not a ninja. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, I'm not a ninja in the movie sense, but I am in the real life sense. And so is that if we as human beings can step into our full capability, we'd have nothing to be afraid of.
And now for my conversation with Hakim Isler. Quick note, stay on until the end of the podcast for a bit of bonus content. Hakim and I were having a conversation before the podcast officially started and I started recording, and he was so interesting that I asked him if we could record our conversation for some bonus content. Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality. Today I'm speaking with Hakim Isler of the Psi Games. Welcome, Hakim.
Hey, welcome. Welcome to you too, and thank you for welcoming
Well,
me.
thank you to you too. And yeah, so introduce yourself a little and tell us what the Psi Games are.
Yeah, so my name is Hakim Isler. I live in North Carolina. I have been on this quest in life to really, find out and connect with the world and with nature in a deep way. It led me from 9 all the way until adulthood. I trained in martial arts. Actually, I started martial arts when I was 8, and so now I've been doing martial arts for 40 years. And it's taken me all over the world. First, I moved to Ohio to train in this ninja martial arts, which really was a good art to really dive into because it had so many aspects to it that were spiritual, nature-based, understanding deep, our individual powers, understanding our collective powers, which kind of led me on a journey to understand the mind as well. I joined the military. I became a thing called psyop. Did that for a few years, got out, and really delved into the consciousness community and the survival community. So I've done a lot of stuff in wilderness survival, being nature based. And then I went to school for integrative health medicine with a focus on herbal medicine, got a bachelor's degree in that, as well as been a longtime practitioner of yoga and the 8 limbs of yoga. And then and have done, like over 2,000 hours of study in that. And at some point along my journey, I had a whisper of a feeling, which became the Psi Games. And I really feel like it was, dictated to me more than it was me just coming up with some random idea to do this thing, because I actually fought it. I didn't want to do it because I was like, this is too much. I don't know how to do this. I don't know why this keeps coming up in my mind and in my heart. And when I finally said, yes, I'll do it, then the whole world opened up as far as the support to actually make it happen, the support that I didn't think was there. And now we have this event called the Psi Games, which is this cross-generational conference in which we do lectures, we do workshops. But the main thing that we do, which is different than any other conference, is we have these fun competitions and tournament style competitions where people compete in psychic abilities.
Sounds like so much fun.
Yeah.
But I'm going to definitely want to get more into the Psi Games in this episode. But you have such a fascinating history. What is a psyop? What was your...
Yeah. So psyop is psychological operations. And in the Army, that is a job in which basically the definition, the way we describe it in our doctrine, is to persuade, change, and influence the hearts and minds of a foreign target audience. So we really we have strategic psyop and operational and tactical. And I was a tactical psyop guy. So my job was to really go out into the community and understand what the mindset was of the community, what bad actors might be doing in the community to influence the mindset, and then also develop ways to counter that information, or develop ways to help people understand what it is that we were trying to do in their communities and kind of help influence them in those directions. And so that's ultimately what psyop is. It's like being like a military marketer, so that's probably the best way to put it. And it's been around for a very long time, and it was something that I really enjoyed doing because of the person to person information. Now in our modern day, especially in our American society, it's kind of gained a bad rap because there's been bad actors on American soil who use it for, nefarious reasons. And, but
yes.
It's psyop itself is not a negative thing. It's just something, it's a tool. And then, people can use it in good ways and people use it in bad ways, so it's just a matter of understanding that. And I went into it because the ninja, which is the martial arts that I've been studying for the past like 26 years, ninjutsu, it was kind of their way of surviving in the ancient days of Japan. They had faced a very tough time and a difficult time with the powers that be or that were in Japan at that time. And they were just like they were like the Japanese version of like the hillbilly, like they just loved to live in the woods and in nature, and they just lived up in the mountains, and they just wanted to do their own thing. And the cultural society at the time, the main culture and society at the time was like, no, you do whatever your leader wants, and whatever. If they decide we're going to be a religion, everybody's that religion. If they decide everybody's going to do this. And these people were like, we just want to be left alone. And that just wasn't good enough for the powers that be. So they were like, persecuting them. And so these guys were like, well, we can't fight them, but we do understand psychology. And so we are going to come up with ways to help us influence the hearts and minds of these people. So, or, so that they can stop hurting us and leave us alone. And so knowing that from my ninjutsu background really intrigued me and made me want to go into this as a profession for the military.
Ninjutsu sounds fascinating as well. Did I pronounce that right? Ninjutsu?
Yeah.
Ninjutsu. Okay.
Yes.
What is that?
So ninjutsu, it's odd because a lot of people see the ninja movies like Ninja Turtles and all this stuff, and people running around in black uniforms and doing all these cool backflips, and then they throw. A matter of fact, that still holds today. If I got bad knees and a bad back from jumping out of planes, and and I'm not very agile the way that I used to be when I was younger, and so people will be like, "Hey, you're a ninja. Can you just like run up this wall real quick?" And I'm like, "No," and they're like, "Well, you're not a ninja," and I'm like, okay. So yeah, I'm not a ninja in the movie sense, but I am in the real life sense. And so I tell people, it's very important to understand what the word means, ninja and ninjutsu, what those two words mean. So ninja means one who endures, one who perseveres. Ninjutsu means the art of endurance, the art of perseverance, right? And, it could be the art of stealth, which really kind of the way we look at it is not stealth as in putting on a black mask and hiding in the shadows, but really, how do I stay invisible to the things that don't want to see me succeed and to thrive and survive in my own life? And then when you really break that down, then those things could be things that are trying to stop you from persevering and enduring. And then it's your job to understand how to overcome the obstacles that would keep you from persevering and enduring. And so when you look at it like that, it's not about the punch or the chop or the kick or the backflip or the cool move, or it's nothing about that. The cool move really is, how do you understand your own psychology, your own spirituality, your own physicality, and the challenges that you face, whether it be physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, and how do you thrive and overcome? And that ultimately is the foundation of ninjutsu. It's really learning principles and historical understanding of how do you do that? How do you overcome that? It could be a physical, somebody's trying to like hurt you physically. Okay, how do I overcome? It could be a spiritual / emotional. I've lost somebody very close to me in my life, and it's making me feel like I don't want to go on. Well, what methods or knowledge do you need to actually, what resilient aspects do you need to overcome that so that you can embrace that grief and then transmute it to something that allows you to thrive and continue on? That's ninjutsu.
I mean, that sounds like that would be so transformative and beneficial to really anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you've done other things though too. I mean, you have such a fascinating background in this world. You worked with Mindsight. What did you do that after? Am I following the right order? I'm trying to stay in order of your evolution. So
yeah. So Mindsight came after the military, as well as my deep understanding of remote viewing. So I had a basic understanding of remote viewing before the military because of my ninjutsu training. The ninja had 9 special powers or abilities in which they trained in. They called it the Kuji, or the Kuji-in or the Kuji no Ho. And this idea was that there were these different powers that we can invoke at times of challenge that we would need them to help us thrive and overcome, to persevere. And one of them was this ability to see in a different time and a different place. And, and my teacher told us when he came back from Japan that he met a man who was working at Wright Pat Air Force Base who was doing a class on this thing called remote viewing. And, at the time he couldn't tell anybody about it. They had everybody sign these NDAs and all this stuff. And so it was just something that he did in secret. And And later he told us more about it, and he showed us some techniques from the ninja and showed us what these guys were doing. But I was still very physical. I was in my 20s at that time. So I was like, okay, this meditation stuff is cool, but I just want to like really learn how to like flip somebody, you know? and so I was, a lot younger. And later in life, when I had this kind of inkling about the Psi Games, one of my students came up to me and they were playing with this or what we call mantra and mudras, but it was from like this animation cartoon called Naruto. And they were like, look, I can do this mudra. And they weren't calling it a mudra or mantra. They were just doing hand weaving and they were saying some words. And I was like, we have something like that in our martial arts. And they were like, oh, really? That I can have these abilities? I can do that? I said something like that. And they were like, okay, show me. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. The only answer I have is, hey, kid, train for 20 something years like I did and hang out in the woods and do all this stuff. And you might have an experience, and a kid is like, yeah, nah, I'd rather just pretend I'm a ninja character from a cartoon than to go off and do all this hard training in the rivers of, and all this stuff. And so I was like, it would be nice if we had an easy way to help kids explore their own personal power and grow in the abilities that we all have. How do I do that? And then I remembered my teachers talking about remote viewing. So I looked into that and I found my teacher, Paul Smith. And through Paul Smith, I really got connected with many of the other military remote viewers who from the past. And I trained with all of them. And then I found the Monroe Institute, and I found out about Gateway, which was something that they sent a lot of remote viewers to. The military did, and so I went there. And then I found that Joe McMoneagle, who was another famous remote viewer, was training there or teaching there. So I went to his classes, and that's what happened. But the protocols were still too difficult for kids and for them to understand. So I was like, well, what else is there? And then that's when I found Mindsight, and I was like, oh, well, okay. This would be cool. Put a blindfold on a kid and just have them like find things in a room and like be able to explore. And that's where I took to the next training. So I started finding teachers who were really quality teachers, and I started training with them. And that's how I got, proficient in the understanding and doing of Mindsight. And then I started teaching our children that, and they were having a lot of success. And that's kind of what led me to those two paths.
Wow. And do you have a mind-blowing experience from each of those that you'd like to share, both with remote viewing and with Mindsight? And that's amazing you studied with Paul Smith and Joe McMoneagle. We've had Paul Smith on, and we're had Dale Graff on, and that episode's about to go live. So
yeah, so here's what's really funny. The guy that my teacher told us about in my 20s that he had worked with from Wright Pat Air Force Base, and I didn't know this, was Dale Graff.
Oh, no way. So he's like the OG of it,
So when I met Dale, I didn't know this. And then he talked about him being in Ohio, and I was like, and so I went up to him. I said, hey, do you know a guy named Stephen K. Hayes? Oh, yeah, I know Stephen. I was this guy, and we worked together. And I was like, you're the guy, And so we started talking about that. It was a beautiful moment. It was a beautiful moment. But yeah, so Dale and I have had multiple conversations about him and my teacher Stephen's connection, and it was just funny how I came about the whole process and going through that. So, but to answer your question, the most mind-blowing moments was my best remote viewing was the one that I did where I was the most stressed. So Paul requires that you do 10 homeworks before you can take his next course. So I had taken the basic course, and I wanted to take the intermediate, and his intermediate was coming up, and I had owed him a 10th session, and I had not had time to do it. And now I'm supposed to be leaving the next day to go to his intermediate class. And he warned me, he said, don't come to the class if you haven't finished it. And, I'm sure he would have given me some leeway, but, I took that to heart. So I was like stressing, I'm like packing, I got work to do. So normally a good remote viewing is going to take you hour and a half session. And I'm like, I just don't have that time, but I got to get this homework done. I was like, well, I'm just going to do it as fast as I possibly can and just put it in an envelope, bring it with me and give it to him just because, I just don't have any time. So I sat down, I'm all stressed out. I get the numbers, I start doing the stuff. And, about 20 minutes later, I'm like, okay, in session. And I write a little summary. And I look at I finally get the envelope. I open the target and it's like a dead on match. I mean, I drew this thing and it was no mistaking that it was the thing. And it was the best remote viewing I've done. And when it was really odd for me because I was like, I didn't have all the time in the world. I didn't have the cool down session with the Zen music and all the cool and the incense burning in the background and all is quiet. I just sat down in this rush and all this distraction and I did this thing and it turned out to be my best one ever. And that was just super mind blowing for me.
I was going to ask you as a question if you noticed a difference between when you were accurate versus not. And you answered that, and that's not at all how I would have expected the answer to go. I thought you were going to be like much more calm, profound. I mean, that really challenges an assumption I assume most people would have had about when it would work versus not.
Yeah. And that leads me to, my some of the work that I'm doing now is not Ingo Swann, who's considered the father of modern remote viewing, he said this quote, and the quote was, "You should be able to remote view in a foxhole."
Right? Because it's about used in army.
Yeah, and I thought, some people think they hear that and they think in a very militaristic way, like because he says foxhole, and they think, oh, that means that I have to like go out and be in the army and I don't think he meant that at all. I think what he really meant was that anytime, anywhere, no matter what's going on in your life, you should be able to hone in and remote view. And that means that, and when I asked Joe McMoneagle and Lynn Buchanan how to do something like that, he said, well, you have to train that way. And that brought me to this idea that's the whole idea about growing these psi abilities. People say, well, why do I need this? I'm never going to just like, I remote view for fun. It's like a hobby I do, blah, blah, blah. What would I need this for in my everyday life? And I think that's the challenge. The quality challenge is how do you bring it into your everyday life to make you more intuitive, to make you more connected? Not, when all the conditions are right, that's the only time I know how to do this. It's when all the conditions are not right that I'm still able to do this, that really makes it valuable to the everyday individual. And so in that moment that I was sitting at my coffee table or my dining room table doing this remote viewing with all of this stress and having that experience where I was still able to bring out the best remote viewing that I've done, in my opinion, that really spoke to me because that's real life, right? Real life is not all things go my way, making me the most calm person. But real life is like things are unexpected. And in that, I need to find peace and I need to find center and be able to operate and function in a way that's not going to destroy me. And I think that's ultimately the value of something like this. And that's where I want to get personally with my work is not me sitting in my meditation room on my cushion doing a remote viewing, but how does my meditation room and my cushion become a metaphor for, or how does the world become a metaphor for, or become the reality of my meditation cushion in my meditation room? So the world is actually my meditation cushion in my meditation room, not my meditation cushion in my meditation room, So it's like that's, and in yoga, we call that the journey of the householder. Not the renunciate. The renunciate has very important work, but they also don't have the distractions of the everyday. They move out into the wilderness or into the mountains, and devotees might bring food to them on occasion, and all they do all day is meditate and do the work. But the householder, we have the real challenge. The real challenge is, how do I figure out how to feed myself and feed my family and serve my community, and then stay centered and do my practice in the midst of all of that. And part of that is my practice. That's the ultimate practice. How do I be the example for those around me of the person that embodies the true nature of their mental, spiritual, emotional selves, and that's something that's a whole nother, evolution, a whole nother thing.
And that just seems to apply to life across the board. How do you stay focused and clear-headed and make good decisions when everything is in real high stress situations? I mean, that just could apply in your day at work.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like, I know I and probably all of us struggle when things get anxious, is probably when you need to be the most clear-headed and focused. And I think a lot of us start feeling panic and distraction, and that's when you suddenly get least clear-headed. So it's almost a practice that would apply to just every little bits of life.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly it. There's been times when I've been so stressed and I'm like, I want to sit down right here and meditate, but I'm in a group of people. And so then I started saying to myself, well, how do I find a meditation where I'm not actually sitting in a cross-leg, position, on my floor, but I'm doing that in my mind and in my heart. And people are looking at me and they don't even know that that's where I am, but they can feel that that's where I am,
Yeah. I actually want to back up, because there's something I think a lot of people are probably not clear on. I wasn't until I delved in a little. What is Mindsight versus remote viewing? What's the difference when you do Mindsight? And what is Mindsight exactly, I should ask?
Yeah, so Mindsight is broken into two aspects. One is called intuitive sight, and the other one is, clear sight. And so intuitive sight is that I have a blindfold on, and you, let's say, hold up a card, or you hold up something, like maybe a card with an animal on it. And I don't have a visual of it in my mind. Like, I'm not seeing a turtle, but for some reason, my inner self tells me, say turtle. And then you say, it's a turtle. And I'm like, well, how did you know? Because it is a turtle. And you're like, I just know. I don't know how I know. I just know I said turtle. Clear sight is, and so that's intuitive sight. So I intuited that it was a turtle, and I said it was a turtle, and I was correct. Then there's clear sight. Clear sight is this idea that I can actually, for some way, without using my eyes, see through the blindfold. And so I can see literally in your hand a turtle, even though my eyes aren't, seeing a turtle. I mean, my eyes aren't actually operating because I got a black mask on and I can't see it, but somehow I see it. And that's clear sight, clear Mindsight. So those two distinctions are very important. And what people often struggle with is, well, how can you see without using your eyes, And, that's why my friend has a school he calls vision without eyes. It's like, and there are other people who have schools similar, and so that would be one aspect of it, is seeing without your eyes. So that is what we call a local awareness. So I'm locally aware of what's happening in my immediate space, and I can see or intuit what's happening in my immediate space, right? Remote viewing, how it differs, one, it has a protocol, and then two, based on the way it was designed, and then two, it is that you get impressions or perceptions of something that's at a distance from you, meaning it is not in your local environment, right? Maybe where you are, and I'm here in North Carolina, you're in New York, and I'm like, hey, there's a guy, I feel like there's something buzzing, sounds spinning, mechanical, zippy, this, that, and other, and you're like, oh my God, there's a guy drilling in the next room. They're doing all this drilling outside, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what's going on. That would be like a remote viewing. Like you are remote to me. That location is remote to me. It's at a distance, right? So it's non-local. And that would be one aspect of it. Now, the difference is now I can see you on the screen. I put a blindfold on, you hold up your book, and I say, I see WTF. And you're like, oh, that's it. You got it. And so even though you're not local to me, it's still, I'm using that inner sense to see the object on the screen. And that is my mindsight.
And is it physiologically different when you experientially for you? I don't know how to ask this because I don't have an understanding enough, but is there one where you feel like, I don't know, waves going through your head, and the other you feel a sense of calm? I don't know how to, you tell me.
Yeah, it's really difficult to ascertain because it's not something that I do so often that and have reviewed in that way quite often. It's hard to come up with the words for what it is, right? And what you're feeling. And that's why I think it's very difficult. Matter of fact, I asked a friend, I said, what was one of the most amazing things about Ingo? Because he's really close friends with Ingo. Well, he was really close friends with Ingo when Ingo was alive, Ingo Swann. And he says, Ingo's true gift was not remote viewing and all these other things. His true gift was that he could do these things and then articulate them in a way that other people can understand them, which is super hard for something that's just deep inside that you don't even really have words for. Like, what is that feeling? I don't even know how to express it, to somebody. And there's a lot of things like that where we look or search for words to explain something that almost feels unexplainable. It's like, how do I tell somebody that I feel this? We have that. I'm sure, you've been around long enough. I've been around long enough that we've had relationships where, you have a hard time in your relationship and something happens and they say, well, what's going on? And you're like, I wish I could tell you. I can't put it into words. I don't know. I can feel it. And I know it's there, but I can't tell you what it is. That was Ingo's gift. And I think that's tough for me still to this day to like really articulate what that is. I know what I've done and the protocols I've done to get there. So that tends to be a little bit easier to explain, like, hey, this is what you do. But how it manifests within you as a feeling, that's for you to kind of to intuit or to know. And then whenever whatever comes up, like even with Mindsight intuition, where I have people like feeling for colors, I've listened to hundreds of people now that I've taught to do this. And some people, I'll say, I ask them, I say, what do you feel when you find the color? They say, oh, I feel warm on my hand. Some people say, I feel cold on my hand. Some people say, I feel like a vibration on my hand. Some people say, I feel pressure. Some people say, I feel a little tap, like somebody's tapping on my. So it's like, now you got all of these different, everybody's doing it, but they all have these different ways of explaining what's happening in their process. And so I'm teaching the basic process of this is what you do, and then how it manifests through their own spirit is up to them. And it may be different for everybody.
I don't know if it exactly makes sense, but it kind of can about colors, because colors are really like light bounces off of them in different ways. So if you're really feeling into waves and light, which carries information, like there could be a way you could feel that. Wow. And so I want to ask you, when you were growing up or in your past, before you started delving into all of this, did you have any initial psychic, or as I call the what the fucks, experiences?
Yeah, so definitely I did. When I was, my mom said that I said a lot of profound things when I was young. And I did a lot of profound things when I was even too young to remember. So for instance, and we were just talking about this last night because my daughter is 12 months now and she's just barely taking some steps. And this lady at the Build-A-Bear that we took her for her birthday was like, "Oh yeah, when my son was 9 months, he was able to walk." And then my mom was like, "That's like my son, Hakim. He walked at 8 months." And so my mom was going through a very challenging time with my real father, my biological father, and he was abusive, and so she was ready to leave him, or she was trying to make a determination. They had just had this knockdown, drag out argument and fight, and she, asked him to leave, and he was trying to come back into her life, and she asked God to send her a sign. She said, I don't know what to do. I have this young son and, his father, and I feel like I need to get away from this situation, but I don't know what to do. Can you send me a sign? She said, as soon as she thought, can you send me a sign? At 8 months, I stood up and I walked towards the door to leave. She said she was blown away, one, because I was only 8 months. Two, that immediately when she had that asked that question, that would be the response, was that I get up and I start walking away. And she packed up her bags and she left, and that was it. And so that was like, that story to me tells of some sort of connection or intuition or something going on there. Now, whether that was her speaking to God and God speaking to me and then me getting up and walking, or whether that was me sensing intuitively that that's what she needed, and then I had this kind of like embedded wisdom in me to say, okay, here's the answer. Let me show her the answer. I'm not sure. So two other profound moments that happened later in my life was, one was I was 8 years old, and this time I was 9 years old, and my mom asked me, what did I want to be when I grew up, right? And her and my aunt, they were like, what you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I stood up super proud, pumped out my chest, and I said, I'm going to be a ninja.
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was zero chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF just happened.
And she was cute. Like, yeah, and she and my aunt did just what you just said. Oh, that's so cute. They laughed a little bit. They weren't sure what a ninja was and if that was even a real thing. And they didn't want to tell me that it wasn't a real thing, or that they didn't think it was a real thing. So they just kind of smiled and said, okay. So then, all these years passed by, and now, I'm an adult, and 12 years passed by, and I'm an adult, and, I had this very crazy experience where my friend, a really close friend of mine, committed murder, and I was just like, oh my God, what does this mean for my life? If he's able to do that, am I able to do that? And I need to get out of here, and I need to change my environment. And so I started looking to what I was going to do as growing up. I mean, what am I going to do with my life? And I was like, well, I love music. I could do music anywhere. And I love martial arts. I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. So what am I going to do? And through some crazy circumstances, I ended up finding out that there was this martial arts called Ninjutsu. And the guy who went to Japan, who came back and brought Ninjutsu to America, lived in Dayton, Ohio, of all places, actually Centerville, Ohio. And I was like, what? And went to go visit this guy's school, came back and was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And so I told my mom, I said, look, I'm going to move to Ohio. And she said, for what? And I was like, she was like, you don't have any friends. You don't have a job there. You don't have anything. Like what, you don't have any family in Ohio. I was like, cause I'm going to train with this martial arts guy who teaches ninjutsu. And I want to dedicate my life to this thing called ninjutsu and be a ninja. And she said, whoa, what? I was like, I'm going to be a ninja. And she said, are you kidding me? And I was like, no. And she was like, you said that's what you were going to do when you were 9 years old. Do you remember that? I said, no, I don't remember that at all. She was like, no, you professed that you were going to be a ninja when you grew up. And so that started the journey. But, now for the past 18 going on 19 years, what I've done for as a profession is I've run my martial arts schools teaching ninjutsu. So that's what I've done for a profession for the last 18 years. So
Yeah.
9 years old now. I'll fast forward to almost 40 years later, and that's what I've been doing for a career. So I knew back then. I knew that this was going to be my path. And the other thing I did during that same age period at 9, I had a dream of the lotto numbers. And my mom would play the lottery every so often, and I woke up and she was taking me to school, and I said, "Hey, I dreamt the lotto numbers, I think, last night." And she said, "What, really?" I was like, "Yeah." And it was 6 numbers. And so that's super hard. And dreaming or precognition, coming up, with numbers, 6 consecutive numbers that are going to be correct in the future is very difficult. And I did it. And she played it, and it came out, it came out nationally and not locally. And she played it locally, but not nationally. And so,
oh, that's so frustrating.
yes, I was like, couldn't I have just gotten that extra piece of information?
Yes.
Hey, Mom, here are the numbers, and don't forget, play it nationally. And but we found out, and that was another moment that she knew that something was unique with me. Something was going on that I had. She didn't know about the ninja thing. That was still like a fun little thing going on. But she knew that I did that thing when I was a baby walking, and then she knew that I was able to say these numbers, and they came out. And she very much followed a lot of my intuition when I was a kid.
Yeah. And, I'm just going to add a bit of a side note, because I know I thought this early on, and I think a lot of people do. Well, if this was real, psychics and mediums would all be playing the lotto and multimillionaires. And I hear multiple stories like that, where they get the exact numbers and they're one number off, or they're like dream and they see October 2023, and then it turns out to have happened like that day in October 2024. Like just little things where they'd get close but not quite. So the first 2 numbers. So yeah, I mean, I think there's enough evidence to show that there's something real here, but there's not, it doesn't work 100% flawlessly, but it works statistically significantly beyond the odds of chance. So I would like to remind people of that, because
yeah, but I love that you said that, and let's take it to a very human level, right? I think that we are so egotistical and just really hard on ourselves as a society when it comes down to psi abilities. Oh, some skeptic wants to pop up and say it's not real. Well, why is it not real? Because it doesn't happen all the time. Okay, well, what does happen all the time? So you may go out to your car 100 times, and then one day it just doesn't start. You may not get into an accident a bunch of times, and then one day you do get in an accident. Most of the time you stand up and you walk from point A to point B without falling, but sometimes you do fall. We don't put that, oh, so now you can't walk because you fell a couple of times. No, you can walk, you just tripped, And it's the same thing with psi abilities. All of a sudden, with psi abilities, it has to be 100% or not at all. And even though you show statistically that it's significant, you're able to do this thing at 30 or 40 or 50%, and that's statistically significant. There's still these mindsets out there that'll say, well, it's not 100. And, if it was 100, then I'd believe it. And it's like, well, what is ever 100% all the time? And
I don't think anything. I mean, we're 100% gonna die. I mean,
yes, exactly.
That's a given, but we don't even know what that really means. We're 100% gonna have the appearance that we died. So,
yep, exactly, and that is, that's where we are, and I think we're loosening up on that as more and more data comes out, and that data becomes available, and then the people become inspired and motivated to go and look for that data.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue into the Psi Games. Let's run the rest of the podcast pretty much talking about the Psi Games. So you touched upon, is there anything more you want to add about what inspired you to start it?
Yeah, so not I mean, I did say earlier that I got a intuition or something that this is what needed to happen, and then I fought it, and I was just like, oh, that's too big. that's too crazy. How would I ever do something like that? It
Yeah.
didn't even have a real name. And then the name appeared, and then I was like, okay, well, that's cool. It was a cool name, but yeah, I still don't have time. I don't have resources to do this thing. And the final straw was that I was listening to a podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and they were talking to this guy named Dr. Lacatski. And he actually wrote a book called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, and they were asking him about these experiences and this data that he was able to gain, doing research into non-human intelligences and UAP. And they were like, well, what's going on here? Why can't you talk about this stuff? Is it so dark and so evil that it's just so scary that, and Dr. Lacatski jumped in and was like, no, look, I don't see any danger here at all. He said, what I do see is that, or what I can say, he said, he stopped himself. He said, is that if we as human beings can step into our full capability, we'd have nothing to be afraid of. And it hit me as though somebody was in the car with me screaming it out, Psi Games. And it was like, that's how we get the mass population to the next level, is we have to make it fun. We have to make it collaborative. We have to figure out what the standards are. Who can do remote viewing the best and the fastest? And then we push that pace year after year. And a good way to do that is through games. How do we reach the next generation? Well, we're not going to interest the next generation by saying, watch this 1 hour lecture by this scientist that holds 9 PhDs that explains quantum physics to you, right? That's a 9-year-old does not give a crap about that. But what they will do is play a game. They'll have some fun, So let's have some fun, and have a good time. And then that's how we get people. And it just was so clear in that moment that that's what needed to happen. And I decided to move with it, and it's been growing ever since.
And this year is going to be the second one. Am I right? Was last year the first?
Yeah. This year is going to be the second. And this year is in 2026. It's going to be the second. Yes. And last year was the first one. We thought we would only get. There was a point where we only had like 100 tickets sold, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster." And then I was like, "We need to make at least 300 tickets," And this friend of mine named Jimmy Church, he was like, "Man, if you sell 300 tickets, you're a rock star for a first time event." And then we finally made it to 300, and I was like, "Oh, good, yes, that's it. I guess that's where we are." And that was only like maybe 2 months out from the event, so I was like, "Okay, that's where we're at." And then out of nowhere, we ended up hitting 620 people came to the Psi Games, just under 620. God. And I was just like, what just happened? To the point where I thought that I started getting nervous that the fire marshal might show up and be like, we got to shut this down. It's too many people, because it was more than what the hotel was supposed to hold. And so we did great. It was amazing. And it just showed that the world really wants something like this.
Yeah. And so tell us, well, first of all, tell us what exactly it is. What is the experience there and what happens?
Yeah. So the Psi Games focuses on 3 aspects. One is, learning, or one is information. So we give people information, and that we do that through lectures, right? So we have all these people who come. Most of them are PhD holders or really high level trainers and practitioners of these different skills and these different knowledge bases. Everything from mediumship to remote viewing to Mindsight to dowsing to magic to memory to cognitive ability and neuroplasticity. Like, we have scientists and researchers in all those fields, and they do lectures on those. Then secondly, on day 2, we call it Inspire, and that is where we play the games. We have these fun tournament style competitions where multiple people get on stage to compete in remote viewing or dowsing or Mindsight. And that's designed to really push the envelope of it, let people know where we are, how fast can a person do a remote viewing, and how accurate can they be. And if that's the level this year, then what, everybody will work the whole year to beat that, so that next year if we're even in a different spot and we know that there's a new possibility of where we could get as a species. And then also what that does is that shows the audience and the people in the world like, whoa, this is super cool. This is going to be something that we can inspire, that inspires people. So this year we had a lady named Dahlia come on there. She did Mindsight, and she did a perfect run. We had, in under a minute, and it was just mind blowing. Standing ovation from hundreds of people. The room erupted, and so many people went home inspired to learn Mindsight and started training and doing, and that was it. That's what we want. We want, because people didn't know it was possible. So when that was the biggest feedback we got, was I had no idea something like that was possible. Well, I knew quite often people who were at the Psi Games knew of Mindsight, but they didn't know it could be done on that level. And that inspired so many people to go out and start training. And that's what we want, right? And so that's the inspiration day. And then the last day is what we call educate. So inform, inspire, and educate. The last day is educate, and that's where we do workshops. So now you've been informed, you know what remote viewing is. Then you've been inspired. You got to see somebody do remote viewing live and with other people in this tournament style competition. And now you're like, I actually want to learn how to do remote viewing. So then the following day you go to these workshops.
Was there anyone who, first of all, came in, I mean, maybe this was a bunch of people, but was there anyone who came in, or anyone who was like, no, this isn't possible, or anyone on the board maybe who used to feel that, who changed their mind completely the way I did? Or did you witness any of that at Psi Games?
Most people who came to Psi Games already had an inkling that it was real, to what level though? That's where I think people got really blown away. But there are a lot of stories of people like yourself who had these moments where, they did not believe in this. They were skeptics, and they had a moment that changed that for them. And so we have a lot of stories like that in the Psi community. But at this point for the Psi Games, there was not those stories.
Okay. Is there one in the Psi community that stands out to you that you want to share? Because I know a lot of our listeners are kind of at the point where they're starting to be at that point of changing their mind the way I was.
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
Nothing that I can think of right this moment that really stands out. I mean, I've heard this story so many times. I think the general theme of story that has stuck out the most for me is that most people have experience when they're a kid, and then because of the community that they're involved in, or their family or whatever, they shut it down, or it gets shut down. And so then they pretend, or decide that they're not going to believe in it, and then they close off to it. And when they become an adult in their 30s or something like that, or 40s, they then have a very real, visceral experience with it. Maybe someone they love passes on, and then that person comes back to them. Maybe something else happens, and then they're like, oh my God, I remember I had this experience when I was 7, and then I talked to, grandpa or mom or whoever, and they said, no, this can't be, or it's evil. And then I shut it down. And then now they're in their 40s and they're having this experience again. And then that sets them off on a quest to learn more about it. And then they go out and they start studying. And that's kind of one of the aspects of Psi Games that we're aiming to change for people, is that we want to create an environment that's welcoming to young folks, so that they can have a place to go to get not only more training and understanding of these modalities and disciplines, but also good quality mentorship, because there's a level of ethics that comes with this as well. So if you can read minds or see things in other places and all that stuff, and you could do that as a kid, and we're saying we want to help kids really explore that and grow in that, then we also need to have good mentorship. So there has to be some foundation and grounding in ethics, so that, like anything, like, want, if I can look in on a love interest or somebody I think that I would love to court, as a female, then it's not okay that I'm like using my remote viewing to like spy on her, no more than it would be using a camera, a little hidden camera to put in there. So, but if you're a 10-year-old, somebody has to tell you that that's not okay immediately. You may not have the moral framework to really be able to understand that that's not an okay thing.
I hate to ask this, but there's no way I'm not going to be able to after that. Are there people doing that? Do we need to be worried that, like,
sure, there are people
doing? I don't
know anybody personally because I don't hang out with those type of weirdos or creeps, but but I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who have these abilities who are not using them in a way. And I mean that we do have a frame of reference for that, and we do have precedents for that, because there have been. As long as, if you look at any ancient cultures or traditions that explore these abilities, they all warn and they all talk of people who have been able to develop these abilities who didn't use them for good reason. They used them for negative reasons, or to take advantage of people, and to and things of that nature. And so therefore the balance still continues. I've had several conversations with people in the modern day who are really nice people. And because their life is set up a certain way, they refuse to want to believe that these abilities, or getting to high levels in these abilities, can ever be used for anything negative. So I remember talking to one woman, and she was like, I work with these kids and they have these abilities, and I don't think you can ever use these abilities if you were coming from a negative place. And I'm like, well, that's a great way to feel. But the truth is that if you look at what we know based on these cultures, different cultures all around the world talk about people have used these abilities for negative ways. And so therefore, yeah, it's, the kids you're around may have really good hearts, but, your experience is anecdotal to the full spectrum of all the world, so you might,
there's 8 billion people.
Yeah, exactly. You might know 10 kids, but there's like billions of kids around the world. And so there are definitely probably ones growing up in not nice environments with not nice people around them. Not saying that doesn't mean that they can't grow up and be these beautiful people. But also, they're. I mean, I hate to say this because I wish it wasn't so, but there are child soldiers in the world who are taken from their families, put weapons in their hand, given all types of drugs, and then told to go out and kill people. So, if we really look at the world, we could say, hey, there's probably kids that are being, coerced and forced to do certain things that they don't want to do. And it's a little naive, I think, to say, one that I support. I love that naivete, to say like, hey, this can only be done in a good way, because that's what I'm aiming for. I want to teach people all the positive aspects and from a positive, loving place. But, I also don't pretend that there's not people out there who can do the same thing from a very negative, evil place. So
are there checks and balances on that? Because like I've met some people who probably were naive, who were like, oh, the abilities would stop at a certain point, or I have no opinion. What do you think there's checks and balances?
Yeah, I think the checks and balances, I think the checks and balances are the people who are doing it for the right reasons, who really develop those abilities. I think the true I think the higher level of check and balances is not pretending like the other side doesn't exist. And that's where the balance is,
Right.
I think I think that's where we get into sticky ground if we just choose to, like ostriches with our head in the sand, say it's just this way because that's the way I feel and that's the only way. And I had an OBE, out of body experience, when I was at Monroe, and I came upon this. I don't know what you would call it, because I don't know if it was an entity or whatever. But it gave me some very clear messages before I even knew what these things were, and it told me like, "Hey, you're going to be a part of this galactic federation." And I was like, "What is that? I've never even heard of that." And I wrote it down on my notepad when I came out at a session, so that's how I remember it. And it said to help protect planets from low vibrational entities. And I thought to, and again, I came out of it, had no framework for any of that. So I didn't know where it came from, other than I had to have some connection with something. And then I just wrote it down and just let it be. But then now, since then, which that was years ago, I've had several understandings and deeper understanding that there might be something out there that's having this, that are doing these things. But the thing that was very clear to me, that there are entities that are lower vibrational that are doing something, and they are threats to some degree to worlds out there. So it might be a lower vibration, but it's still equally or powerfully destructive in how it maneuvers. And so I don't know, again, like, all this is on a plane that I can't even explain with words, how this came about and so on and so forth. But if I was to just take that at face value and say, hey, maybe there is a possibility that there's these things out there. And then, of course, we all love Star Wars, and the Star Wars had Sith and they had Jedi. So, and the Jedi were all about like, hey, let's work together. Let's be diplomatic. Let's love each other. Let's be compassionate and in the Force. And then the Sith were like, nope, we're using fear and anger and, and violence. And, we want to just destroy people, and they were two sides of a very similar human coin, or species coin, or whatever it would be.
Yeah, and we're a little past an hour. I just want to narrow down questions. How much more time do you have? Do you have to basically race off now, or do you have like a little bit longer?
I have probably a few more minutes, because I have to be on a call at 11:30 my time, Eastern Standard.
Oh, okay, so I will narrow down questions. I'll do, so in all your experiences, what would you say is the strongest evidence you've ever encountered of psi abilities or afterlife or just non-local consciousness?
Yeah, so I would say that my life has been that way. I used to think that I just had a really good knack for just doing whatever it is that I wanted to do. Because people say, whoa, you've lived like a bazillion lives. You've done some really cool things. You've been very successful in all of them. Like, you definitely have to like something. And I used to think, oh, I'm just a jack of all trades. And then I realized through some deep work that actually the power of manifestation is what I'm good at, what I have a quality. And so if I was to say anything, it's the levels of proof that I have are very real in my life. Almost I can't think of one thing that I said that I wanted to do on a very deep level that I didn't do. I wanted to be on television. I did that. I wanted to be a ninja. I accomplished that. I wanted to be a special operations soldier. I did that, I wanted to see the Psi Games come into fruition. It came into fruition, and it's just like this constant magic where like I speak things into existence and they happen. And so if I was to just use my own life as evidence, I'd say that that's the most magnificent thing. I'm amazed all the time that it continues to happen. And I say to myself, well, that is the real magic. And I mean, each one of those things come into fruition and have a wealth of amazing, very unexplainable things that happen to make those things happen.
Okay. And Ben, that's amazing. And I mean, that's the way to live your life, And I'm going to give you two choices of a question, since this will be the last question before sign out. Do you prefer answering, do you think there's an afterlife or survival of consciousness, and why? Or what was a highlight or amazing experience from last year's Psi Games?
I think I answered the highlight, which was Dahlia earlier. So I will
Okay.
say that, do I believe in the afterlife? I definitely believe that that we continue on. In what form, I don't know. But I had another personal experience where, I was on the fence, and then I did what they call a palm leaf reading, which is, you reach out to these, yogis in India, and they believe that these rishis from the past saw people's specific lives, and these rishis were sent messages. Those messages they transcribe down, and then their lineage of disciples continue to hold those palm leaves until the person comes seeking that message, which is going to be at a pivotal time in their life's journey. Well, through a friend in Germany, they recommended I do this palm leaf thing. I had never heard of it. I did it. And right after 2 weeks after I had this moment with this medium on a call, I was on a Zoom call learning Mindsight, and this woman happened to be on there, and she was like, "Hey, I knew you last life. You were my teacher, and you taught me. And then before I was supposed to go out and spread the word and do cool things in the world, I ended up being murdered. And you came to my grave and you told me that I would come back this life and fulfill that journey, and that you would also come back." And then I was like, and I had never met this lady before. So I was like, what is happening right now? So we all cried, and then we got off that call. And 2 weeks later, I'm on this palm leaf reading with this woman, and I mean, with these yogis. And they're looking at my palm leaf, and totally unrelated people, unrelated places. And they're like, "Oh, it looks here from your palm leaf that we believe you have 7 lives. You have lived 6 of those lives. And actually, in your last life, you became an ascendant master," which is the exact words that the lady 2 weeks prior said. She said, "You were an ascendant master and you taught me." And they were like, "But we don't know why you came back, but you chose to come back this time. But it's okay, because you'll ascend this time, and this will be your last life on this plane." I don't know what any of that means, but what I can say is that if I was to just say, "Hey, I have these two," if I was to just use logic, and say, what are the chances that I would be told those 2 messages almost back to back by 2 different groups? I'd say the chances are pretty slim. And so therefore, based on my own experience, which is anecdotal to me, I would have to say that, I definitely believe in it, because, I believe these 2 tells were messages.
Wonderful. Perfect closing. And lastly, where can everyone find you, follow you? When is Psi Games, and where can people get tickets? And where is it held? Yes.
So Psi Games is going to be July 31st through August 2nd in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Westin Hotel, and in 2026. And they can find out about it at PsiGamesInternational.com. So Psi, PSI, not PSY, PSI Games International.com. If they want to find me, they can find me at Hakim, HAKIM Isler, ISLER.com, or greater-potentials.com. So they can find me there in any of those. And so that's it. And I got some books that I published. I'm about to publish some more. Some of them have been published through a publisher, and some I self-published, that you can find if you just go on Amazon and type my name in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, this was great, Elizabeth.
And now stay on for a bit of bonus content of Hakim and I behind the scenes conversation before the podcast officially started. I mean, I liked what you were saying about DOPS, though. You were saying
yeah, and they did all this research on not just near-death experiences, but also past lives. And so they had a bunch of children that they've done research on, and these children were telling facts and information about things that it was like, how do these kids know this information? And then when they would research or check out that information, it turns out that, oh, the kids were telling the truth. This is an actual thing. And how would they know that? And what I was talking about was that my daughter, she's yesterday she turned 1, but
Oh, congrats.
2 months over the last 2 months, I've been playing classical music for her, Vivaldi, and she just takes to it immediately. She starts smiling, she perks up. And then what I thought was her conducting with her hands, I was like, that looks really much like a conductor. But then I brought it to a friend's house, and she actually started twirling and moving her hands, and she can't even walk yet. So I was like, whoa, my friend said, I don't think she was a conductor. I think maybe she's a dancer. She has some connection to dancing and maybe a former life or something. I was like, and then more I watch her, I'm just like, it's kind of convincing. I'm like, I don't know. I've never had a baby before, but on the same token, the level of connection she has with string classical music. I played Beethoven. It's not the same. It's only when I play Vivaldi or something with strings in it, like violin, cello, she gets really engaged and she wants to dance and she has to move and she has to twirl and she has to put her hands up and do all these things. And it's just like, that's super powerful for me to see that.
Oh, I love that. And I really think like there's so many people I'll talk to or I'll read random things on like Quora or Reddit where people will talk about things that back up past lives. And none of them are as strong enough, that Dr. Jim Tucker and Dops would study them. But, so many people have children who will say, when I was big. And it just, I mean, I even have a little memory as a kid, for some weird reason, my parents had this heating pad and it had like this sort of slightly faded blue floral pattern. And when they would take it out, I would panic and I would get like visions. It reminded me of like hospital and dying and where like either I would get images of like either using it in like kind of deathbeds, but almost old fashioned looking hospitals. And it was just this primal terror of like this blue floral heating pad.
Wow.
And it just stopped when I was 5. And I was like, wow, I was weird when 5, you suddenly feel so big compared to 4. And I was like, why was I scared of that? And then I started reading this and had that memory. I'm like, that was so weird. And even the fact it just like stopped at 5. And that's when they say, the research says a lot of the memories stop. So it's just so interesting. And I feel like when you start talking to people, almost everyone has some story they would never categorize that way, that they're like, oh, I was a weird kid, or, I like to play this game. But when or a lot say when I was big, I think that's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hearing that, from my daughter, if she starts to express things like this, I think what I'll do is I'll record them. So that if they do stop at like 5, then we can go back when she's old enough and be like, hey, remember when you used to say this? And if not, then here's what you used to say, and go see if it jogs any memories or sparks up or opens the door again. It's so fascinating where we're headed with young people and with where we are today. And that was one of the reasons behind the Psi Games, is this idea that there's a lot of events out there and we talk about the future and what the future could be. And then we don't have anything for the kids.
Right.
So it's like, how many events do I go to a year? Maybe you, maybe other people. And you look around and it's all people in their like mid to late 30s and above, and the majority of them are in their 50s and above. And so but you don't see any like 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds, and so then you say to yourself, well, we're talking about the future is only us for a little while. We're on the if we go by the average lifespan of a human being, if once you hit 50, you're on the backside of
most likely.
Very rarely do you have another 50 years. You might have another 30 years, and so you're on the smaller spectrum of your lifespan. And so really we need to be talking to those 20-year-olds and 18-year-olds and below and really engaging them, because they are going to be the ones who take up the torch for the next 50, 60 years, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of cross-generational trainings or cross-generational events that allows youth to really engage on a deep level. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do with our Psi Games as well.
How cool. And I would say, like, we should start with super young, because that's when I guess abilities start fading. They say around 5, if you start doing traditional education. I'm like, let's start with like 2-year-olds, I mean,
Yeah.
not in a creepy way. You don't want to make them sit and do experiments all day, but just like integrate it and play and learning and,
Yeah.
So to get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, a sciencey skeptic explores grief, healing, and evidence of an afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?